This is a Grim Reaper Pro Series. They're calling like the Micro Hades 3-blade. Really pretty, like narrow. It's not a huge head, and that's important. Like when you're looking at broadheads, like you have to kind of make your arrows based on what head you're going to shoot, in my opinion. So this is such a low profile. It's got the chisel tip. I don't know. I think just do this real quick. This washer comes off, but these still are insane. Like a lot of those broadheads that have a lot of parts will just fall apart once the washer's off, and I noticed that these don't, which really turns me on. I love that. The last thing you want is a broadhead to come loose while you're hunting and just fall apart in your quiver. So that's just huge for me, and this is just 100 grain, so you kind of have to decide, in my opinion, like what you're going to shoot. If you got a big old nasty broadhead, it's going to dictate what you need to do on the back end. Everybody's pretty concerned with front of center and all that kind of stuff. For me personally, I just want it really basic and simple. On the fletching, I generally just do a slight offset, like a 3-degree offset, so they're not majorly helical. This thing's not going to overspin and drag, and I don't need that with this basically small, low profile broadhead. So that's kind of what I do. So first is we're going to set this up. This is an arrow cutter I got from Cabela's, of all places, and it's a pretty good, I think it was a pretty good price. And so here's kind of the size that I've been shooting, and you can see it's kind of already set up for that. We're looking at what is that, 26 3/8. So 26 3/8, my draw length's 27. So yeah, my arrow is shorter than my draw length. That's pretty common. And if you go to an archery shop, a lot of times they'll have like just a big blank arrow. They'll put it on your bow, you pull it back, and they'll look at your rest and see kind of where's the best spot, and they'll kind of make a little mark on it. So you pull your bow back with this blank shaft that's out to here, and they'll just kind of make a little mark with like a Sharpie, a silver Sharpie, as to where that arrow should be. That's another way to do it. So I've just been shooting the same arrows forever. So these are not 400, these are 340s. I'm on the bubble, and that's often pretty common with arrows, is being on the bubble of the shaft. You're looking at your chart and you're like, oh, it says I'm 27, and you look at the poundage of your bow, oh, I'm right on the bubble of 400, 340. So I always lean towards a little stiffer arrow. And if you don't, then you can just basically cut your arrow as short as possible. Obviously it will make it stiffer, so the shorter your arrow, the less flex, the more stiffness, the more spine. So as far as spine tolerances on these arrows, I usually don't check them. FMJs have always been dependable on spine tolerances. And so the other thing that a lot of people talk about is the spine of shaft, I think it's called, but you can kind of just put a little weight here on my arrow on the end and just make sure that it spins pretty good. I'm putting quite a bit of weight on there, flex it, and to me it doesn't really matter as far as if you have a blank shaft like these. I generally, some people would like cut a little here towards the knock end and cut a little here. I think that's completely unnecessary. Again, I'm more on the simple side of things. So you take these out. These arrows are 32 inches long right out the box. And then when you buy your shafts, you save a little bit of money too. And then for Easton, it's going to come with these inserts. These are hidden inserts, so there's not outserts. It's going to come with a little grind tool. We'll show you that. And then I'll show you the technique on getting these in there. There's a little technique you need to know there, and then there's the epoxy you can't see in this package. So for time's sake, let's just do a dozen today and go from there. So I need to find a mask. For years I was cutting arrows and not wearing them, and I kind of read an article that, you know, a lot of that debris from the carbon is going to be spraying up. It's really not good for your lungs or any of your system to take that in. So just wear a mask when you're cutting carbon arrows, and just trust me on it. Just take my word for it. So let me get a mask. I assume people know this, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Full metal jacket means that yes, there's carbon on the inside and aluminum metal on the outside. Hence the name full metal jacket over the carbon. That's kind of what you're looking at. So I don't really personally know of a better arrow for elk. Didn't make a cut on the back end by the knock, so we can assume that that's factory edge, but this is not a factory edge now. So we're just gonna take this this comes with your arrows, and just kind of clean up the edges. I think the more time you spend here, the better the arrow. You can see what came off there already, and so we got a nice rounded edge, if you will, real clean. And so then that one's done, and so I'll go ahead and run through the next 11 arrows and get them to match this. And then we'll go take it inside and do some cleaning of the arrows. I like to use some sort of like rubbing alcohol and get them cleaned out, and then we will go to the next step after that. The G5 tool, it's called the ASD tool, and you can do this with every arrow. You just kind of put your hand in there, and it just ensures that you are super flush. So that's a full, you can see that's a full wrap. A lot of times I'll just cut the wraps there, and so all that will be wrapped will be from the end of the shaft to where the 2-inch blazer touches the shaft. And I'm just gonna say this about full metal jackets, this is my personal opinion, is that you really have to clean your shafts if you don't want to use a wrap. And you probably have to use like a primer glue and then a really good fletching glue. And you still may have veins come off periodically. I don't have veins come off when I use a wrap. So I've just switched to wraps, and I think I can see my arrow better anyways. So that's what I do that. Voila. So we just nip the tip there. And I think that looks sharp too. So that's just one little thing that I do. I don't know if I might have stole that from, I'm sure I stole it from somebody. Maybe it was Dan Evans back in 2013. I had a deer tag, he had an elk tag. We were in Nevada, and we weren't sharing a camp, but I would go over to his camp all the time at night or even during the day and shoot. He literally would bring a 3D or a block target like the size of the one I have back there with him. He'd have like a 30-foot trailer, camper trailer. He'd have a big screen TV, and then we would just watch all his footage of all the elk he'd glassed up that day through his spotter or whatever. And I checked out his arrows, and he had done this, and it had made sense to me. So we will just go ahead and do all 12 arrows real quick. These brass inserts, these don't come standard. And so what I do for my setup is a 75 grain brass insert, and you can see right here, you can break this off and it snaps off pretty easy, and you can just go with 50. So with my setup, usually if I break off 25 grains and use a 50 grain insert, that will put my total arrow with a broadhead probably around 370. I'm sorry, 470 with the broadhead. That's pretty heavy for a guy who doesn't shoot very long draw length. So, but here is what comes standard. So let's break this off and do a weight comparison of the two real quick, just so we can see that on this. So according to the scale, what comes standard weighs 17 grains, and then 74 grains. Now we're at 51 grains, so pretty big difference as far as weight goes. We got insert glue from boning. That's what we're gonna use. I'm gonna grab a paper towel to clean off the excess glue, and then I'm gonna show you guys a couple tips on when you put these in. We're not there now. All right, so kind of get it in there and get it, take a little excess glue off. We'll be back to get more glue off in a second. So you're gonna find that right there, push it in. Now here's the critical step. Turn it. Let those threads catch. That is critical. Hello, Sedan. Okay, so we're gonna let these arrows dry for 24 hours because it is an epoxy. I don't want them draining obviously down the end of the shaft where we're gonna be screwing fill points or broadheads in. So I like to tip them up and let them dry for 24 hours. And that's why we do that. To put a little string wax on the end of your knock before you bring them in. But this is a knock I already pulled out, and I'm just turning a little bit, and it's going in pretty good, and it doesn't feel like it wants to like come in or out very easy. So that's good. That's what we're looking for. This is an Arizona Easy Fletch. So you're gonna get in there, and you can see it catches. It's completely perpendicular. Another tidbit is if you fletch a lot of arrows, take your time, use some sort of alcohol, and just get this cleaned from excess dried glue so that all your veins are consistent. So we'll go ahead and do a little bit of that right now. It's gonna dry pretty quick, and it doesn't take a ton of glue. So I'm just gonna start on that end, and I go to the next end. Okay. So then we're gonna go push up, and then we're gonna go here. And just gonna wait maybe 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, not a huge deal. Have a Q-tip ready for when you pop this out to dry any excess glue. Okay. And then, final step, this will be a 2-step process, is I'm gonna just do a dab of glue. Just a real small little dab. Okay. Let that dry for 30 seconds or a minute, and then you're gonna flip it over and do the same dab on this side. It's a pretty good looking arrow. Easton 5mm full metal jacket, 340 spine. It's 11.3 grains per inch. I'm cutting my arrow at 26 and what would we say 3/8, so just over 26 inches. It's pretty hard hitting. It's going to weigh just under 500 grains when you put a broadhead on the end. So just make sure that you give it plenty of time for that insert to glue. I think the most important step was that when you went in, that you turned it quite a few times and slowly pulled it out. That way that insert stays where it needs to be. And then we cut the wrap to the exact size. Most wraps will kick down to about here. We think that looks cooler and it puts less weight on the back end. And then we may switch this out for a lighted knock depending on where we're hunting. We're using boating products. It's pretty cool. It's a fun process. So I'm gonna probably batch up this dozen, another dozen, another dozen. So probably about 36 arrows. And then I'm gonna whittle those down to about 12. And I'm gonna index them all. I'm gonna mark each arrow 1 through 36. And then I'm gonna shoot all of them with broadheads and just at long distances and just try to make sure that they all fly pretty good. If one doesn't fly as good, you can always turn the knock a quarter turn and shoot it again. It's just sometimes some arrows just, they aren't meant to be in your quiver. So you kind of have to figure that out. Look up Randy Ulmer. He's written a lot of articles on that stuff. Those are guys that I looked up to when I was coming up in archery. And they're just, you know, a lot of things haven't changed. The more variables you can eliminate as an archer,